Nora West stood in her peaceful kitchen on a drizzly evening in Seattle, watching thin trails of rain slide down the window pane. The sky outside was layered in soft grays, and the street lamps had begun their warm glow, though the hour was still early. Inside the house, everything felt gentle and calm. The scent of freshly baked bread hung in the air, and soft instrumental music drifted from a small speaker on the counter. Nora moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, arranging bowls of snacks on a wooden tray and checking the oven one final time. Her husband, Julian, had invited his friends over for their usual Friday night gathering, a tradition they had kept for years. Julian loved bringing people together, and their home had gradually become the favorite spot for his close friends to unwind after long work weeks. Nora didn't mind at all. In fact, she had grown to enjoy these evenings because the house would soon fill with laughter, easy conversation, and the kind of comfortable chaos that stretched well past midnight. From the living room, Julian called out in his warm, familiar voice, letting her know the guys would arrive in about 20 minutes. Nora replied calmly that everything was ready, even as she continued arranging the final details on the tray. Julian walked into the kitchen for a moment, wearing his soft sweater and his usual relaxed smile. He gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, grabbed a few chips from the bowl, and headed back toward the couch, where he had already set up the large television for the night. The plan was simple: watch a movie, talk, and enjoy the evening like always. Yet something about this night felt slightly different to Nora, though she couldn't quite explain why. Perhaps it was the rain, perhaps it was the quiet hum in her chest, or perhaps it was a small thought that had been drifting through her mind over the past few weeks, persistent, gentle, refusing to be ignored. The doorbell rang suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. Julian opened the door with enthusiasm, greeting his friends Marcus, Derek, and Kevin as they stepped inside, shaking rain from their jackets and laughing loudly as usual. The house quickly filled with energy. Marcus made a joke about the weather. Derek asked what movie they were watching, and Kevin walked straight to the kitchen to see what snacks Nora had made. They had all known Nora for years, and they treated her like a close friend rather than simply Julian's wife. Soon, everyone settled in the living room with plates of food, talking about work, sports, and random stories from their week. Nora sat on the sofa with them, smiling and listening as the conversation moved swiftly from one topic to another. But after a while, the discussion shifted toward movies and creative ideas. Marcus suddenly leaned forward with excitement and mentioned something that caught Nora off guard. He reminded her about a short film idea they had joked about during their last gathering. At the time, it had been nothing more than casual conversation, but tonight, Marcus sounded serious. Derek nodded and added that they had actually started planning it. Kevin said they had been talking about it for days. Then Marcus looked directly at Nora and said they wanted her to take the lead role. The room grew quiet for a moment as Nora stared at them, surprised by the suggestion. She laughed nervously at first, thinking they were teasing her, but all three of them looked completely serious. Julian simply smiled from his chair, as if he had already heard this idea before. Nora felt her heartbeat quicken. Years ago, acting had been a significant part of her life during college in Portland. She had loved performing on stage, telling emotional stories, becoming different characters in front of an audience. But after she married Julian and moved to Seattle, that part of her life slowly faded as daily responsibilities took over. She never regretted her choices, yet the passion had never truly left her heart. Now, hearing Julian's friends talk about watching her perform again stirred something deep inside her. She tried to brush it away by joking that she was out of practice, but the truth was more complicated. Part of her felt excited by the idea. Another part felt nervous about stepping back into something she had left behind for so long. As the conversation continued, Nora looked at Julian, hoping to understand what he was thinking. Julian simply watched her calmly, waiting for her response. In that quiet moment, Nora realized something surprising about herself. Julian's friends wanted to watch her perform again, but deep down, she had secretly wished for that chance, too. Nora tried to laugh when Julian's friends suggested she should act in their short film, but inside, she felt a wave of emotions she hadn't experienced in years. She shook her head and told them she was probably too rusty after so long. Yet none of them believed it for a second. Marcus reminded her that she had spent 4 years performing in college theater in Portland, and Derek added that Julian used to show them old photos from her stage performances. Kevin said the idea wasn't meant to pressure her, but they truly believed she would be perfect for the role they were planning. Nora listened quietly while holding her cup of tea, feeling both shy and curious about their excitement. For years, she had lived a calm life with Julian in Seattle, focusing on work, home, and the small routines that made their days comfortable and predictable. She loved that life, and she loved Julian deeply. But there was also a quiet corner in her heart that still remembered the stage lights, the sound of applause, and the feeling of telling the story through acting. She had never spoken much about it, because life had simply moved in another direction after marriage. When Julian received his job offer in Seattle, they both agreed it was the right step for their future. Stability felt important at the time, and Nora happily supported that decision. Still, every now and then, when she watched movies or saw theater performances online, Julian noticed a special look in her eyes, like a dream gently knocking on a door that had been closed for a long time. That was why he had quietly listened when his friends started talking about the film idea weeks earlier. Marcus explained that they weren't planning anything big or professional. It was just a small creative project they wanted to film for a local festival in Seattle. Derek had been writing short scripts as a hobby. Kevin had some camera equipment, and Marcus enjoyed editing videos. The only thing missing, according to them, was someone who could bring real emotion to the story. Nora tried to argue that many people could do that, but they insisted she was the right person. Julian watched the conversation calmly, letting Nora speak for herself. He knew this decision had to come from her heart, not from anyone else's encouragement. When Nora finally turned to him and asked softly whether he thought it was a good idea, Julian answered honestly. He said that she had spent years supporting everyone around her, and maybe this was a chance for others to support her dream for once. His words surprised her, because Julian rarely pushed her toward anything. He usually respected her quiet choices. Hearing him say that made the idea feel more real. Nora still worried about whether she could perform well after so many years away from acting. She imagined standing in front of a camera again and wondered if the confidence she once had was still there. Marcus smiled and said the project wasn't about perfection, but about creativity and enjoying the process together. Derek joked that even if the film turned out simple, at least they would have a great memory and a fun story to tell later. Their relaxed attitude slowly eased Nora's fear, and the friendly energy in the room made the whole idea feel less intimidating. She looked around the living room at the familiar faces that had been part of her life for years, and realized they weren't expecting anything impossible from her. They simply believed in her talent and wanted to see her try again. That thought warmed her heart in a way she hadn't expected. After a moment of quiet thinking, Nora finally took a slow breath and said she would give it a try. The room immediately filled with excitement as Julian's friends began discussing possible scenes, filming spots around the city, and ideas for the story. Nora listened while a small spark of excitement grew inside her chest. For the first time in a long while, she felt like an old dream had gently returned to remind her that it was never truly gone. While everyone talked happily about the film, Julian sat back in his chair with a thoughtful smile. He trusted Nora completely and wanted her to explore this part of herself again. Yet he also knew something about dreams that others sometimes forgot. When people reconnect with something they love deeply, it can open doors to opportunities, attention, and changes that no one expects. Julian didn't see that as a bad thing, but he understood it could lead their quiet life into new directions. As Nora laughed with his friends and began asking questions about the script, Julian realized that the simple idea of a small short film had already done something important. It had brought back the bright, excited energy in Nora's eyes that he hadn't seen for a long time. and that alone made the evening feel special, even though none of them yet knew where this unexpected opportunity might lead. 2 weeks passed quickly, and what had started as a casual idea during a rainy evening was now becoming real. On a cool Saturday afternoon, Nora stood inside a small rented studio space in Seattle that Marcus had arranged for the filming. The room was simple but bright, with soft lights placed around the center where the scene would be recorded. A camera stood on a tripod, and a few chairs were set near the wall where Julian and the others would watch. Nora held the printed script in her hands, reading the lines one last time while trying to calm the nervous feeling in her chest. It had been years since she had acted in front of anyone, and although this was just a short film among friends, the moment still felt important. Marcus adjusted the camera settings carefully while Derek checked the lighting angles, and Kevin walked around the room reviewing the scene they had written together. Their excitement filled the studio with positive energy, yet Nora could feel her heartbeat growing faster as the moment approached. Julian sat quietly in the back row of chairs, watching her with calm eyes and a supportive smile. He didn't interrupt or give advice. He simply wanted her to focus and feel confident. Nora took a slow breath and stepped into the center of the small stage area, where a single chair and table had been placed as part of the scene. The story they had written was about a woman thinking about old dreams and second chances, a topic that felt strangely close to her own life. When Marcus finally said they were ready, the room became quiet. Derek gave a small thumbs up. Kevin held the script by the wall in case Nora needed a reminder, and Julian leaned slightly forward in his seat. Marcus counted down softly, and then said the word that made Nora's heart jump: action. For a brief moment, she felt the weight of nervousness pressing on her shoulders, but then something familiar happened. The feeling of performing returned, like an old friend she had not seen in years. Nora spoke her lines naturally, letting the emotions of the character guide her voice and expressions. She imagined the story fully, allowing the character's thoughts to flow through her words. The room stayed completely silent as she delivered the short scene about hope, regret, and the courage to start again. Her voice remained calm, yet full of feeling, and her eyes carried a quiet strength that surprised even her. The scene lasted only a few minutes, but to Nora, it felt like time had slowed down. When she finished the final line, she paused for a moment, waiting for someone to say something. Instead, Marcus lowered the camera slowly. Derek blinked in surprise, and Kevin looked at Nora with a wide smile. Then Julian stood up and began clapping, and within seconds, everyone else joined him. The sound filled the studio, echoing off the walls and making Nora laugh in disbelief. She hadn't expected such a reaction from such a small scene. Marcus shook his head with amazement and told her that her performance had felt completely real. Derek added that the emotion in her voice made the story come alive, and Kevin said they hadn't even needed a second take. Nora felt a warm wave of happiness as their compliments continued. For the first time in years, she felt connected again to the passion she had once loved. The nervous feeling disappeared, replaced by confidence and excitement about finishing the rest of the short film. While everyone talked and reviewed the footage on the camera screen, something unexpected happened near the door of the studio. A man who had been quietly watching from the hallway stepped closer, with a polite smile. None of them had noticed him earlier, because he had stayed silent while they were filming. He introduced himself as Gregory Hayes, and explained that he was an independent filmmaker who had rented the studio earlier that day. While waiting to collect some equipment, he had accidentally watched Nora's performance and felt impressed by what he saw. The group listened with curiosity as Gregory spoke calmly about storytelling and acting. He told Nora that her natural emotion on camera was rare, and that many new actors struggled to show such honest expressions in their first takes. Nora felt surprised and slightly embarrassed by the attention, but Gregory continued respectfully, saying he believed she might have potential for bigger projects. The room became quiet again as everyone absorbed his words. Julian glanced at Nora, noticing the mix of excitement and uncertainty in her eyes. Gregory then mentioned that he was preparing a small independent film project connected to a regional festival in Vancouver and suggested that Nora consider auditioning if she felt interested. The invitation wasn't a promise of success, but it was still a real opportunity. Nora looked around the room at Julian and his friends, realizing that the simple short film they had planned for fun had suddenly opened a door none of them expected. The moment felt both thrilling and surprising, leaving everyone wondering where this unexpected turn might lead next. Later that evening, after the excitement in the studio slowly settled, Nora and Julian returned home to their quiet street in Seattle. The rain had stopped, and the air felt fresh as soft clouds moved across the night sky. Their house was peaceful again, a sharp contrast to the busy energy of the afternoon. Nora stepped onto the small front porch with a warm cup of tea in her hands, while Julian leaned against the wooden railing beside her. For a few moments, neither of them spoke, both thinking about everything that had happened so quickly. Just a few weeks earlier, they had been living their normal routine, and now Nora had finished filming a short scene, received praise from Julian's friends, and even been invited to audition for an independent film project in Vancouver. The entire situation felt exciting, but also overwhelming. Nora stared down the quiet street as she tried to organize her thoughts. She had enjoyed acting again, more than she expected, yet the sudden opportunity from Gregory Hayes made the future feel uncertain. She wondered what it would mean for their peaceful life if she decided to follow that path. Julian noticed the thoughtful expression on her face and understood exactly what she was feeling. He had always known that Nora cared deeply about acting, but he also knew she valued their stable life together. After a long moment of silence, Nora finally spoke. She said she never expected things to move so fast and asked Julian honestly whether he thought pursuing the audition would change their lives too much. Julian listened carefully before answering. He told her that life always changes in small ways, but sometimes those changes lead people towards something meaningful. Nora looked at him, still unsure. She explained that she didn't want success or attention to create distance between them. For years, they had built a strong partnership based on trust, simple routines, and mutual respect. The thought of stepping into a world filled with auditions, cameras, and new people made her nervous. Julian smiled gently and reminded her that the short film idea had never been about fame or pressure. When his friends talked about watching her perform, they weren't expecting anything dramatic. They simply wanted to see her reconnect with the passion she once loved. He explained that during the years they had been together, he sometimes noticed how she paused during movies or theater scenes, quietly studying the actors as if remembering a part of herself that had been set aside. Hearing that surprised Nora, because she hadn't realized Julian had noticed those small moments. Julian continued by saying that watching her perform in the studio earlier that day had been special for a different reason. It wasn't about the camera or the script. It was about seeing the excitement return to her face. That energy reminded him of the woman he met years ago in Portland, when she used to talk about storytelling and creativity with endless enthusiasm. Nora listened quietly as his words sank in. The worry in her chest slowly softened, because she understood that Julian wasn't afraid of her dreams. He wanted to support them. She asked him what he truly hoped would happen next. Julian looked up at the stars appearing